Hi, ladies and gents. It's me again. Right, so we're going to do Romeo and Juliet. We're looking at Act 1, Scene 3, and this time, no, Act 1, Scene 4. This time, we're looking at it's before the party. We uh, we know that Juliet is going to look upon Paris and see if she kind of fancies him. We know that all of the great and good of Verona are going to be at the party. We also know that Romeo and his friends are going to crash the party. So this is just before they get to the party. So let's have a look and see what happens. Right. Okay, so what happens in this scene? So first of all, again, there's three things that happens. First of all, Romeo and his friends make their way to the Capulet party, okay? And one of Romeo's friends is this guy called Mercutio, and this is the first time that we're seeing him. Now, Mercutio is like one of those kids in that everybody knows, who is witty and funny and a bit of a dope and the life and soul of the party. He talks about Queen Mab. Now, Queen Mab is a fairy queen, and she visits in dreams, sort of things. So he's talking about kind of the fantasy world, if you like. And then the third thing that happens is that Romeo has a premonition, and a premonition is a kind of like, it's a bit of a bad feeling. So he's right to have a premonition, because this is not a comedy, it's a tragedy. Okay, so first of all, Romeo, Benvolio, and their friend Mercutio are on the way to the Capulet party. Mercutio tries to get Romeo to dance, but Romeo is still pining over Rosaline and refuses. He is a mizzo. He is a party pooper. He is, he's just a moan bag. Because he's all he cares about is, oh, I'm so in love with Rosaline. I'm so in love with Rosaline. He can't be much fun. I wouldn't bring him to the party. He also thinks that they shouldn't go to the party because of a dream that he had. So Romeo's all about feelings. He's unlike other Shakespearean kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Heroes, for the want of a better word. Like say Hamlet. Hamlet is not so much about feelings. He's all about logic, and science and stuff like that. But no, Romeo is all about dreams and feelings and intuition and stuff like that. Anyway, Mercutio delivers a long and crazy speech all about Queen Mab, a fairy who visits people in their dreams. So because Romeo tells him he has a dream, Mercutio goes on about Queen Mab. So he points out that dreams are meaningless and that we shouldn't read too much into them. Now, this is something that Shakespeare comes back to time and time and time again in all of his plays. At that time, in the 1500s and early 1600s, people would have seen dreams as being somehow prophetic, or meaning that they had meaning. But I don't know about you. I sometimes dream that, I'm half human, half banana. I mean, my dreams are mental sometimes, depending on how much cheese and wine I've had before bed. But Shakespeare comes back to this kind of theme time and time again, that we should put our faith more in science than dreams. So he becomes quite worked up, that is Mercutio becomes quite worked up by his own speech, and Romeo has to calm him down. So just before they head into the party, Romeo has a premonition that fate will put something in motion that night that will ultimately lead to his death. So there's this foreboding. Foreboding means there may be trouble ahead, but if there's moonlight and music and love and romance, because this is Shakespeare, you're gonna die. Anyway, just before they go into the party, he has this premonition, and again, this is another trick that Shakespeare tends to use from time to time. So let's have a look at it.
Give me a torch. I am not for this ambling being, but heavy I will bear the light.
Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance.
Not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead. So stakes me to the ground, I cannot move.
You are a lover, borrow Cupid's wings and soar with them above a common bound.
I'm too sore and pierced with his shaft to soar with his light feathers, and so bound. I cannot bound a pitch above dull woe. Under love's heavy burden do I sink.
And to sink in it should you burden love, too great oppression for a tender thing.
Is love a tender thing?
Exactly.
It's too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorn.
If love be rough with you, be rough with love. Prick love for pricking and you beat love down.
Come, every man betake him to his legs.
Come, we burn daylight, ho!
And we mean well in going to this mask, but 'tis no wit to go.
And why, may one ask?
I dreamt a dream tonight.
So did I.
Well, what was yours?
That dreamers often lie.
In bed asleep while they do dream things true.
Oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. She's the fairy's midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little atomi over men's noses as they lie asleep. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut made by the joiner squirrel or old grub, time out of mind the fairy's coachmakers. Her wagon spokes made of long spinner's legs, the cover of the wings of grasshoppers, her traces the smallest spider web, her collars of the moonshine's watery beams, her whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film, her wagoner a small gray-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm, pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. And in this state, she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love. On courtiers' knees that dream on curtsies straight, or lawyers' fingers who straight dream on fees, or ladies' lips who straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry mad with blisters plagues because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometime she driveth o'er a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breaches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of healths 5 fathom deep, and then anon, drums in his ear, at which he starts, wakes, being thus frighted, swears a prayer or two, and sleeps again. This is that very Mab that plats the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul, sluttish hairs, which, once being untangled, much misfortune bodes. This is the hag, when maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them first to bear, making them women of good carriage. This is she!
Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace. Thou talks of nothing.
True, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain begot of nothing but vain fantasy, which is as thin of substance as the air, and more inconstant than the wind, who woos even now the frozen bosom of the north, and being angered, puffs away from thence, turning his side to the dew-dropping south.
This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done, and we shall come too late.
I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my suit on, lusty gentlemen!
Okay, so what do we make of all that? Okay, so there's a lot of words there, a lot of stuff being thrown around. So let's just see what it all means. Okay, so lines 1 to 47 is where we have Romeo as a reluctant party goer. He and his friends are making their way to the Capulet party. Even though they're wearing masks, Romeo is worried that they're going to be recognised as Montagues. He wonders what they'll need to do, what cover story they can come up with. So, what shall this speech be spoke for our excuse? Or shall we on without apology? So he's saying, what are we going to do? Are we just going to crash in? Or are we going to have a story or what? To anyone who's ever crashed a party, it's always good to have a story. So Benvolio replies that there's no point in coming with an elaborate excuse. They won't overstay their welcome. They'll just stay for one dance and then they leave. Romeo then tells his friends that he's too melancholy to dance. He's like, oh, I'm too sad to dance. He says, you have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead. He's a bit of a self-pitying git, really. Mercutio counters that if Romeo is so in love, he should borrow Cupid's wings and soar with them. Romeo insists that, on the contrary, love is weighing him down. He says, under love's heavy burden do I sink. Again, self-pitying. So then we have Mercutio's quite long speech about Queen Mab. Romeo has doubts about going to the party. He says, we mean well in going to this masque. Masque is a really old-fashioned word for a masked party, where they've got those kind of carnival masks on their faces. But 'tis no wit to go. It's not a good idea. It's not smart to go. When Mercutio asks why he's changed his mind, Romeo replies that he dreamt a dream tonight. His dream, which he doesn't reveal until the end of the scene, it has filled him full of foreboding. So that means that, like, it's not a good dream. Foreboding means there's bad things ahead. They trade jibes and puns. The way that, like, blokes when they're together, like young lads when they're together, they slag each other off all the time. And that's kind of how they're going on in this particular scene. We get to see these young men hanging out with each other. They also are quite rude when it comes to the ladies as well. Anyway, so they trade jibes and puns about whether dreams have any predictive power, leading Mercutio to bring up Queen Mab. According to Mercutio, Queen Mab is the fairy's midwife. By this, he means that it's Mab's job to bring dreams into being, the way midwives bring children into the world. Mercutio gives a detailed description of the imaginary Queen Mab. She's as tiny as a gemstone, so she's like a little gem, no bigger than an agate stone. She travels in a chariot made of an empty hazelnut. So hazelnut is tiny, it's like this size. Well, not even, it's that size. Okay, the wheels of the chariot are made of spider's legs, and the canopy is made of grasshopper wings. The wagon is pulled along by atoms and driven by a bug, her wagoner a small grey-coated gnat. She uses her chariot to invade sleeping bodies. So this is something that when you're asleep, this kind of like insect-like creature comes along and kind of crawls all over you. Ew. So he says, in this state, she gallops night by night. According to Mercutio, Queen Mab only causes people to dream about what they already want. When she visits lovers, guess what? They dream of love. When she visits courtiers, so that's kind of like minor celebrities, they dream of curtsies or fawning. Then lawyers dream of money, ladies dream of kisses, soldiers dream of battle, and so on. Mercutio's point is that dreams don't foretell the future, they just reflect our desires. Basically, Mercutio is trying to get Romeo to stop being such a dreamer and to live in the real world. Mercutio's speech begins as a bit of teasing fun, so an elaborate performance to impress and entertain his friends. However, the longer the speech goes on, the more violent he becomes. Mercutio works himself up into a frenzy, and a sense of bitterness starts to creep into his language as well. By the end of the speech, Queen Mab is a hag who teaches girls how to bear the pain of childhood. This is the hag when maids, and this is the bit where he's like, making rude gestures to the chair. When maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them first to bear, making them women of good carriage. So according to Mercutio, dreams can be silly and frivolous, but they can just as easily turn into nightmares. Okay. Finally, Romeo can take no more of Mercutio's rant and tells him that he is talking nonsense. Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace. Thou talkst of nothing. So you are talking of nothing. Mercutio agrees with him, reinforcing his point that dreams are meaningless and shouldn't be taken seriously. Then Mercutio's Queen... So why are we labouring on this thing? Well, Mercutio's Queen Mab speech is one of the most famous in the play. It introduces Mercutio as a wild and imaginative character who sometimes gets carried away with wordplay, with stories, and with his imagination. Also, Mercutio is going to be a very important character in terms of the plot. what makes things happen. So we need to kind of like him. We need to find him amusing and sympathetic. So the speech parallels the play itself, starting out as light and funny, but quickly descending into something much darker. It's rich in imagery and rather mysterious, so it's open to very many interpretations. So, for example, in Baz Luhrmann's 1977 movie, or 1996, 1977, Jesus, what planet am I on? Movie version of the play, Queen Mab is a poetic reference to an ecstasy tablet, which Mercutio gives Romeo before the Capulet party. The surreal, hallucinogenic imagery of the speech fits oddly well with this interpretation. So maybe that is, it's a clever interpretation. And we will look at Baz Luhrmann's version of Romeo and Juliet as well. Anyway, so the last bit, the third part of this scene, is Romeo's premonition. So Benvolio steps in and reminds Romeo and Mercutio that they're going to be late to the party. Before they carry on towards the party, Romeo has a hunch that something bad is going to be set in motion that very night. He says, some consequence, yet hanging in the stars, shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels. So Romeo even suspects that this chain of events will lead to his untimely death. So ultimately, however, he decides to leave his life in the hands of fate. He says, but he that hath the steerage of my course, he who can guide me on my journey, direct my sail. He's saying, put me on that path. Okay, so let's watch it again. Okay, so let's watch it again.
Give me a torch. I am not for this ambling being, but heavy I will bear the light.
Nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance.
Not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead.
Soul of lead.
So stakes me to the ground, I cannot move.
You are a lover. Borrow Cupid's wings and soar with them above a common bound.
I'm too sore in pierced with his shaft to soar with his light feathers, and so bound.
So love has made him miserable.
Pitch above dull woe, under love's heavy burden do I sink.
And to sink in it should you burden love, too great oppression for a tender thing.
Is love a tender thing? It's too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorn.
If love be rough with you, be rough with love. Prick love for pricking, and you beat love down.
Come,
It's all about the
every
puns.
man, but take him to his legs.
Come, we burn daylight, ho!
And we mean well in going to this mask, but 'tis no wit to go.
And why, may one ask?
I dreamt a dream tonight.
So did I.
Well, what was yours?
That dreamers often lie.
In bed asleep while they do dream things true.
Oh, then I see Queen Mab hath been with you. She's the fairy's midwife, and she comes in shape no bigger than an agate stone on the forefinger of an alderman, drawn with a team of little atomi over men's noses as they lie asleep. Her chariot is an empty hazelnut made by the joiner squirrel or old grub, time out of mind the fairy's coachmakers. Her wagon spokes made of long spinner's legs, the cover of the wings of grasshoppers, her traces the smallest spider web, her collars of the moonshine's watery beams, her whip of cricket's bone, the lash of film, her wagoner a small gray-coated gnat, not half so big as a round little worm, pricked from the lazy finger of a maid. And in this state, she gallops night by night through lovers' brains, and then they dream of love. On courtiers' knees that dream on curtsies straight, or lawyers' fingers who straight dream on fees, or ladies' lips who straight on kisses dream, which oft the angry mab with blisters plagues because their breaths with sweetmeats tainted are. Sometime she driveth o'er a soldier's neck, and then dreams he of cutting foreign throats, of breaches, ambuscados, Spanish blades, of health,
They're all
5
moves
fathom
in fencing.
deep, and then anon, drums in his ear, at which he starts, wakes, being thus frighted, swears a prayer or two, and sleeps again. This is that very mab that plats the manes of horses in the night, and bakes the elf locks in foul, sluttish hairs, which, once being untangled, much misfortune bodes. This is the hag, when maids lie
again,
on their backs.
It's gone from being funny to being a bit darker.
Making them women of good carriage. This is she.
Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace. Thou talks of nothing.
True, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an
Mercutio.
idle brain, begot of nothing but vain fantasy, which is as thin of substance as the air, and more inconstant than the wind, who woos even now the frozen bosom of the north, and being angered, puffs away from thence, turning his side to the dew-dropping south.
This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done, and we shall come
Benvolio.
too
Come on,
late.
hurry
I
up,
fear
hurry up.
too early, for my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my suit on, lusty gentlemen.
Okay, so where are we at now? Okay, so we're at that awful, awful part of the PowerPoint where we have to consider homework. Okay, so the reading and writing questions to understand, ignore that. I want us to think about love, okay? And I want you to go to your textbook if you have it. If not, go to, what's it called? No Fear Shakespeare. And look at lines 17 to 28. So answer the question first. How does Romeo characterize love in these lines? What does he say about it? You know, spoiler, he's not going to say something pleasant because he's not having a great experience of love. The next thing is, how does Mercutio characterize love? Again, same thing. He's quite scathing about it. He's very cynical. Then how does Mercutio's relationship, this number 3, relationship advice compare with that which was offered by Benvolio in scenes 1 and 2? So Benvolio, if you remember, he's saying, look, oh, you know, there's loads of fish in the sea. All women are the same. You know, if you're in love with this one, you'll be in love with her until you see a finer looking woman coming along. How does what Mercutio has to have to say compare with that? And the last question is, who do you think gives the better advice? Okay, so again, any questions, any problems, you know what to do. I'm going to put this on Microsoft Teams as well. I've set up a little what's it called, a group for us, and I'll put this on there. Okay, so like I say, if you have any questions, get in touch. Don't be afraid to email or Edmodo me, but do it all before 5 p.m. because I want you to not be worrying about this in the night time. Okay, just come on now. We have bigger fish to fry. We have bigger things to worry about. Okay, so Brothers out, and I will see you again soon.